Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Design Review Board meeting on June 19th, 4 p.m., and it's actually 4:07 when we're starting today. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. Do we have any declarations of conflicts today? Okay. Seeing none, can I get an approval of the agenda? We just have the one item. Okay, moved by Sharon Letters, seconded by Brian Gillis. All those in favor? Jackie, are you in favor?
Yep, in favor.
Great, thank you. And I'll get an adoption of the minutes from our previous meeting on April the 17th, if I can get somebody to move those. Moved by Sharon, seconded by Aaron. All those in favor? Jackie?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. And just before we get moving on to the business arising from the minutes, I just wanted to welcome our new design review committee members. And we have Mary Nicholson. And Jackie's on the phone. She's also on the planning board. And so this is actually her second meeting. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you, everybody. My regrets for not being there in person tonight, but very happy to be here.
Great, thank you. And, okay, so just moving back on to the agenda, any business arising from the minutes from April 17th? Okay, seeing none, we can move right on to our agenda item, which is 308 to 312 Richmond Street. And it's a request to review an exterior design proposal for a new three-story, three-unit townhouse development in the downtown neighborhood, which is the DN zone. And I'll turn that over to Laurel. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of Design Review Board. This application is for a design review proposal at 308 to 312 Richmond Street. This was the proposed dwelling that was on the site. It's a 2.5-story, three-unit townhouse currently. And the applicant has requested to demolish this building and construct a new dwelling in its place. The location of the property is just one in from the corner of Cumberland and Richmond Street, right here. And it, as per Section 7.1 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, anything in the 500 lot area exceeding 215 square feet, a new build or an addition is required to go through the design review process. So this project, it's been in for quite a while. We started with it over a year ago. And this was actually the original proposal. It was for a flat roof, 4-story structure. So it was 3 stories. You can see the large glass panel windows. And then it stepped back to a 4th story with a rooftop terrace. And this housed like a stairwell and some mechanicals and stuff. So it was quite tall. We sent it to the design reviewer, which was Peter Fellows, and he performed a design review on it. And when we received the design review back, both staff and the reviewer had some concerns with the design of the building in context along the streetscape and in context with the existing architecture that's on that portion of Richmond Street. And you can see in the report that he did indicate that he had some concerns. He basically stated that he believes that the major design and development flaws with the submission were as follows: inappropriate scale, inappropriate roof lines, meaning the flat roof, inappropriate fenestration, the windows, doors and such, and a general disregard for the streetscape. So in his opinion, given the design, he felt that he couldn't support the project. Within the report, he talked about the fenestration, the 7-foot-high modern-type vinyl windows, the fact that along the streetscape on Richmond Street, there's 27% of the lots were actually heritage properties, and he just felt that this design did not fit in. He did provide some alternate thoughts, and he basically said in the report, I cannot in good faith reject the proposal without at least offering some thoughts on what might make this condo more appealing for this particular site. Included within this document are some sketches based upon drawings submitted suggesting how one might address these flaws, yet maintaining much of the good work Architecture 360 has already done. So he indicated that items that do directly address the design review issues provided for would be a pitched roof, which is more consistent with the area. A hip roof will reduce visual impact of the structure mass, both front and back, as well as side to side. And he did provide a sketch to the developer with some suggestions, basically. So he basically said the horizontal roof line of the suggested version shown is 4 feet 10.5 inches lower than the proponent's cornice, exclusive of the guardrail. Also, the proponent's scheme rises vertically another 12 feet on either side. Decks on the rear will be much more cost-effective than rooftop terraces. Replacing the triple roof with double hungs along the front elevation will much better respect the neighborhood. He also felt that reducing the use of metal panels while increasing more traditional residential cladding will be more favorable to Richmond Street. So the design reviewer did feel that the design work for the architect was, in general, the building was an attractive building. It just didn't fit into the context of the area, and that's why he didn't support it. So we provided the comments to the applicant and his architect, and they went back to the drawing board, basically, no pun intended, and they come up with this scheme. So this one does have gabled roofs, the vertical sliding windows, and the fenestration that would fit in more with that streetscape. So the gable roof, typically along Richmond Street, I think I might have a little bit of a shot. Oh, I didn't, actually. But typically along that stretch of the streetscape, you can see just here, there's gable roofs, and this one also has a gable roof, and down the street is quite similar. There is one hipped roof, we did note. So in order to review this design, there was two options. We could send it back to the design reviewer, which would require another design review application, or we sat down as staff in the department and we reviewed it in context with Mr. Fellow's recommendations. And we felt that this design did check all the boxes that Mr. Fellows recommended, so they addressed all his comments. So we felt that there wasn't a need to send it back to the design reviewer. Now, the heritage officer and I did look at this, and the one thing that we did feel was out of context for these garage doors. They just didn't disguise the fact that they were garage doors along the streetscape, and we felt that they could do a better job to disguise those and not stand out so much along the streetscape. So this proposal was submitted for these garage doors from the developer's architect, and both the heritage officer and I reviewed them, and we do feel that they are more in keeping with the proposed design. So we're recommending that the proposed design be accepted as presented with these particular garage doors, as opposed to what they're showing on the sketches. And that's basically our recommendation. If the board has any advice on the design, and if they would like to give us some comments, we're very open to that, so.
Thank you for that presentation, Laurel. I'll open it up to the board. Does anyone have any questions, comments? I'll do my best to answer, and if I can't, I will certainly
Sure.
hand it over to...
I'll start if you don't
yeah,
mind.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Was there any information provided on the site itself? It's a little unclear in terms of the street frontage. Like for a triplex, they need a 50-foot street frontage requirement, and then how far the building's being stepped back on both sides.
Do you mean for the actual original, Aaron?
Well, there's
This one being stepped
there's
back?
no information on a site plan
Yeah.
in terms of what the side yard setbacks are.
I don't think we received a site plan. I'd have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure we didn't.
So just to clarify, today, though, it's just about the design
It's about the
concept.
design. We have
Anything
to-
about setbacks would come through planning staff and planning board? Is that correct?
It will, yes, and they would have to meet the bylaw
Right.
before we can issue the permit.
Right, so
Side
today,
yard.
it's more so the approval of the
The
design.
design.
Right, okay, I just wanted to clarify that, just because I know those were great questions, Aaron, but I think those will come up
So-
during our planning.
Yeah, so I guess the reason I was asking is, depending on the side yard setbacks, it impacts the materials that can be used for construction. It impacts whether there's openings, windows or not. If these are less than 6 feet or less than 4 feet off the property line, there's not a single window allowed under the National Building Code, and it's probably a non-combustible material. So it's steel siding or it's concrete block or a whole bunch of things that I do think, it's hard to make these reviews when you're not getting the complete picture.
So what the architect indicated for cladding, it would be pre-finished wood with pre-finished aluminum accent panels, spandrel panels, and asphalt shingle roofing.
On all sides?
He didn't indicate that. I actually emailed him on Friday and asked, and that's what, he was out of town, so he came back with that comment. Just let me,
I suppose Aaron has a good point. Maybe we're doing things backwards, are we? Should design review be the last thing we do after planning
Not
approves it?
necessarily,
Not
but I do
necessarily,
think, I
yeah.
mean, the bylaws do state that you're supposed to submit a site plan where parking is being accommodated, landscaping, the setbacks in relation to the other buildings. So we've got nothing, I shouldn't say we have nothing. There's a computer model that shows a couple of views, but it's hard to get a feeling on the exact scale and relationship between the new building and the existing buildings.
so the parking is accommodated within the building. They've met the parking within the building. Yeah.
So they just have to provide for 2 of 3.
They do have to provide for 3. So
I
they
think it's just
are,
half
Yeah,
space,
so
half
they're-
space per unit, right, Laura?
Yeah,
I think?
it
So
is.
it's
Yeah.
one space basically.
yeah,
for-
it is half space per unit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, shoot. I downloaded from a previous, been on the fly today, from a previous application. It should be 303 Richmond. Like there. There we go. Yeah, but I do know what you're saying, Aaron. They would, yeah. I mean, it does determine the materials on the side, for sure. But I mean, whether they, I guess whether they meet the bylaw, like if they're meeting the bylaw and they still have to fire rate it, I mean, that would trump design.
I know, it's a tricky thing because it's like, it's not just a front of the building facing the street.
I
It's-
know.
It's context and then we're being asked to make a decision and then they have to change things that, materials, anyway, from a code perspective, I think
Yeah, and we don't,
there's a challenge with exiting. They need to have a second means of egress or balconies. So that's going to impact what the thing looks like. So it's always, I don't know, I find it tough to review these with limited information.
yeah, I mean, the only, we do have the front and the rear view, and the rear has balconies on the second level for the center units as per your package, but they're not showing balconies for the upper levels.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, generally, we would we would deal with the site through the planning review when it gets to building permit stage, but I do understand your concerns with the materials. But as I said, it's whether design or not, the National Building Code is going to trump the design
Yeah,
of the
no,
building.
I can appreciate that.
Because we've had
Just-
that, I mean, you know that, we've had that happen in the 500 lot area.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, we'd like to have, those traditional materials on all sides, but if it comes down to a safety issue, then we have to go with what meets code.
Yeah.
Thanks. Anybody else, questions, concerns? Mary?
I'm brand new, so I don't really have a lot of context. So if my questions seem basic, I
No,
apologize.
that's fine.
But I noticed, and I did have just a bare chance to read through the bylaw, but I noticed in the documentation that you provided that it talked about it somehow needing to differentiate the building from not being an old building.
Yes.
But then the design bylaw talks about it needing to fit with the original character and structure and so on. And so I wasn't sure what the line is because, I have just through chance and an old life been into this building and it was a disaster, right? So, it's not a beautiful building, but the new one, none of those designs particularly look like they kind of fit with. And so I'm just not sure what the line is. We're kind of trying to hold on that.
So you want it to be not a replica of a heritage building, but you want it to be a product of its time. So you want.
And why?
Because you want to be able to tell what is a heritage building and what isn't. I mean, in the heritage circles, people, like heritage purists say, you don't want a fake heritage building. So you don't want to completely replicate something that, is old, that is, of 1700s or 1800s or whatever. You want to be able to walk down the street and say, okay, this isn't a historic building, but this is a newer, more modern building, but it's still sympathetic to the buildings in the area and fits in. So you don't want something that's completely, doesn't fit in with the streetscape or the height or the bulk and the scale or the cornice lines don't match up. But on the same token, you don't want something that's going to be an exact replica. Like, what could here's an example, I'm going to use this. Gateway Village in Borden, Carleton. When it was built to look like an old village. And they're not historic buildings, and they kind of replicate that look. So you just don't want historic mimicry. Would that be a good way to explain it, Brian? I think. You're an architect, you would have a better.
I guess the first thing is that we're not here to pass our personal opinion. on
Correct.
what the style should be.
Yes.
I think there's step one is for an architect to interpret the intent of the 500 lot design guideline.
Yep.
And then that goes to an external design reviewer.
Yep.
In this case, the design reviewer made it very clear that the original design paid no heed to any of the considerations of
Right.
the 500 lot design guidelines. He very carefully made suggestions in terms of what the elements were that were in
Yes.
disharmony with the bylaw. He also went above and beyond in terms of providing actual design sketches to suggest some ways that could be used to come closer to the intent.
Yes.
This went back to the architect who reconsidered the design. In perfect world, I guess that should have gone back to Peter Fellows consideration. So staff has made a very clear sort of review of the elements that were suggested. And I think it's really a question now for us as the intent of the bylaw written in, not the necessary sort of judgment of what the different ways you could interpret that.
Right.
Yeah.
So he, for example, he said that the fenestrations were not correct and suggested double-hung windows, and the new plan does not incorporate that. So how do we reconcile that?
Well, the new plan, this isn't it. They're the 1/1, well, they're 3, and then you've got this other configuration in the center.
Same as the original design,
Well, the other design was,
isn't it?
they're wider, they're a different type of window. They're similar, yes, they are similar, but
So that's what I'm just not sure, what is
Yeah.
our, where do we, you're right, he made very clear recommendations. They kind of didn't really take any to a certain extent, although they did change the roof.
the roof line's been
Yeah.
changed, the height has been lowered. The other one was over 40 feet, so now they're down to 37. Where this is a gable roof, it fits in more along the streetscape than what they were proposing. Like, the other building was a very modern building. The other building, when I first saw the other building, I felt it didn't fit at all. And my concern was the height of the building adjacent to, the other buildings on the street. Now, this still is higher, but it's been brought down quite a bit, and it is under the requirements in that zone for height. So there's a minimum and there's a maximum range in height in the downtown neighborhood zone. Yeah, so it has been brought down. I mean, is it a total, totally in scale with what's there? No, it's not. It's still a bit higher, but I think you're gonna see that push-pull anyways if we were to send this back to the design reviewer. I don't think, given his recommendations, that he was gonna require that to be brought down in height more when you look at his comments. And I mean, I am not an architect by any means, and I'm not professing to be. I did review it with our heritage officer, who is an architect. Originally, that's her educational background. And she felt that it was more compatible with the neighborhood, and I agree with her on that. We do have the option, if we wanted to send it back to a design reviewer, to review the project again. If the board feels that it does need that second review, that is an option.
I guess my question is, why didn't he go with the design reviewers mock-up?
Because, I mean, he made suggestions, but he also, if you read his comments, he also discussed gable roofs. So the reason why he discussed a hip roof was just because he felt that that would disguise the height a little more. Not that it was any lower, but it was disguising the height a bit more. But he did feel that, if you look at his comments, that a gable roof was more in keeping with the other roof lines in the neighborhood. And quite truthfully, I like the gable roof myself. That's my own personal opinion, as opposed to the hip roof. I felt that this looked more like it was in keeping with the neighborhood. So we felt that those boxes were ticked, that he suggested. The rooftop terrace was removed. They put, yeah, they put well, it is and it isn't. It was the style of building. It was a beautiful building. It just did not fit that neighborhood. There was nothing wrong with the architectural design of the building. It just you know, it just wasn't appropriate for where he was wanting to locate it.
Okay, and back to Aaron's comment, which was quite valid, when he talked about the materials depending on the setbacks. How does that work with design? I mean, now you've got me thinking, like, what happens if we approve the design based on the product that they plan to use, and then it turns out that it doesn't adhere to the building code? And I know you mentioned that the
Yeah.
building code trumps everything.
It does.
But does that mean that it has to then come back to design review again if the products need to be changed?
It would depend on, yeah, it would depend on what they have to use. And like I said, if they suggest a wooden material, and then we get to the point where we're reviewing it for permit, and we're looking at the setbacks, and we're saying, okay, building inspector looks and says, okay, that's not gonna meet building code. You're gonna have to fire rate the wall, or you can't have exposed openings, or whatever, then that has to be met in order to construct the building. I mean, they just can't make a building unsafe for the sake of materials. Or the other option would be to make the building smaller and pull it in further from the property boundary. So that would be an option too, so it might have to come back to the board for that reason.
I would like to make a motion. I strongly feel that we do not have enough information to make a decision. I think the lack of really valid site plan information is a flaw from a perspective of the designer making decisions without context put in place. I think putting us in the position of trying to, or staff trying to interpret the design reviewer's intent, I don't think is correct. And I also believe that when we're dealing with an infill project, that the bylaw is looking for the infill scale by just looking at the building in isolation without having some sense of even overlay, whether it's photographic or drawing.
Of the building next to the,
Buildings puts us in a compromised position. I did go to the site to visit it on the weekend and just take a look at the contacts, but coming back and looking at the drawings, I'm making guesses in my mind as to how this fits together. So lack of information cannot approve it. Send it back to the design architect and go to the design review.
So Brian, are you putting a motion on to defer it and send it back to the design review?
Reject what's before us.
Okay.
And to send it back to the architect to review and submit it again to the design review.
So are we better to defer, because if we do a straight rejection, does it not have to start all over again right from the beginning?
completely over.
Whereas if we defer it, then we could defer back to, for the design reviewer for next month? Would that be okay?
So
Okay,
just to be clear, do you?
Yes.
You want the applicant's architect to provide site plans and additional information, but do you want that to go back to Mr. Fellows, or do you want it to come back to the board?
I believe it should go to the design review.
Okay.
Clear interpretation of the bylaw through that lens. So we're not here being the third review. We're here to purely make considerate review based on that design review process.
So, Brian, you're also asking for an overlay of the building next to the adjoining buildings, just so I know to.
Laurel, I think, like, I actually think you have the tools, and under the bylaws in 314.2, it outlines what a design review should submit for you, and just reject them if you don't get them. Like, let's be consistent, make everybody's life, including yours, easier. And the applicants, it spells out in the bylaws what they are asked to submit. It's their job to illustrate to us whatever's necessary, whether that be elevations or drawings or photographs, to convey why this design fits the context. And this is, I completely agree with you, Brian, there's no context provided.
And if I can add to that, I think the specific question I would have is, if the review person's called a reviewer, Mr. Fellows,
Yep.
if he indicated that the windows openings were incorrect and they haven't been changed, then what do we do with that?
I don't think we can use this same reviewer because he has since retired, so we will have to look for another reviewer.
I'm just curious about that, because he is sort of saying double hung windows, and to me, at least, this is a black and white, so it's hard to know. It looks like the same sort of windows as on the first building, at least on the
Yeah,
sides, but it's hard to know, and so it seems like it doesn't match what he said, but I could be wrong,
Yeah.
so.
Apparently they are different windows. That's what the architect had indicated, so. But I mean, we will confirm that. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious what another reviewer is going to say. And we would be reviewing from the context of just this particular drawing, not the original proposal. So the original proposal would not be submitted to the new reviewer. It would just be this one.
Can I ask you just for my own understanding, with the garage doors that we've sort of identified, what about those, and that design, was something that you thought was more?
Well, it was just disguised, more the colors, I mean, this doesn't show color, but there's more of an architectural design to this particular door. Has windows. The other one, I mean, it was just a very plain garage door, which, would, be very, glaring, I think, along the streetscape. When we're dealing with, I mean, buildings today, I mean, in the 500 lot area, ideally you would want the garages located at the back, but when you're dealing with such narrow lots, then the only way to deal with it is to really disguise them as much as possible. And, we just didn't want something that was going to really stand out. So, I mean, we will indicate to the client that they need to provide additional information, and we will have to secure another reviewer because this particular gentleman has retired, and we don't have a lot on our roster right now. I believe are you on the roster, Aaron? No, you were at one time. But you wouldn't be able to anyways because you're on the board.
So the motion on the floor is to defer until the process is completed as outlined in our terms of reference as Design Review Board.
Submission
Yep.
is reconsideration of the comments made through the design review process and submission for
Is your mic on? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, Brian. Just so that we can record what you're saying.
to reconsider the application based on a complete submission as outlined in the bylaw, which includes site planning and specific criteria, a reconsideration of the comments made by the design reviewer Peter Fellows, and a new submission to go before a design reviewer, and then to come back.
So that is the motion on the floor. Does anyone like to second that? Okay, that's seconded by Aaron Stavert. So any questions on the motion that we have on the floor? Jackie, do you have any questions?
Is she there?
I have no questions at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, so I can call the question then if there's no other. All those in favor of the motion?
In favor.
Okay. Any opposed? Obviously not. Okay, so that motion is carried. Okay, so that will go back to go through the proper procedure outlining in the bylaw and the entire wording, the way Brian worded that. Is that
Yeah, I
good?
made some notes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And just back to our agenda. Okay, so an introduction of new business. Do we have any new business that anyone would like to bring up? No? Okay, seeing none, I'll have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Sharon, seconded by Aaron. All those in favor? Thank you very
In
much,
favor.
everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.